When was the last time you smiled in public but collapsed alone in silence? Not a breakdown, not an explosion. Just that slow, invisible ache behind your eyes when no one's watching. You show up, you perform, you keep going. But inside, you're quietly falling apart. And here's the lie you've been told your whole life. Pain is a problem to eliminate. But what if that lie is the exact thing keeping you stuck? In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you what Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor, psychiatrist, and the father of logotherapy, discovered about the 4 most dangerous lies we believe about suffering. Lies that silently destroy your ability to live with meaning and make you think your pain is your enemy. This isn't theory. This is Jonas Keller's life. He's 31. He lost his younger brother in a car accident, spent a year numbing his grief with distraction, fake smiles, and hollow routines. Until one night, in a locked bathroom, holding a glass shard, he whispered, "Is my suffering proof that life is meaningless? Or is there something inside this pain I haven't seen yet?" What I'm about to show you will forever change how you see the hidden parts of yourself reflected in other people. The broken, silent, aching parts we're all trained to hide. Stay until the end, because I'll reveal Frankl's most dangerous truth, the one shift that transforms suffering into strength and despair into direction. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to stop fighting your pain and start listening to what it's been trying to teach you all along. Because suffering isn't your enemy. Misunderstanding it is. And that misunderstanding might be the most dangerous thing in your life right now. Jonas Keller used to believe his pain was a glitch, a mistake, something to suppress, avoid, medicate, or distract. He had a good life by most standards. A stable job, an apartment with warm light, friends who meant well. But when his younger brother died, suddenly, violently, something shattered. The world didn't make sense anymore, and neither did he. Why him? Why now? What the hell am I supposed to do with this? Those questions haunted him. And worse, no one around him had answers. They offered cliches. Everything happens for a reason. He's in a better place. You just have to move on. But something in Jonas screamed, "No, this isn't right. This doesn't help." He tried everything. Therapy, workouts, silence, chaos. And yet, the emptiness grew. Until one night, doom scrolling on his phone, he stumbled on a quote that would change everything. "Those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how." Viktor Frankl. He paused, read it again. Something clicked. Frankl wasn't just a psychiatrist. He survived Auschwitz. He watched everything be stripped away, his family, his freedom, even his name. And yet, he didn't go insane. He didn't collapse. He observed something dark, but honest. Suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. And here's the first lie society feeds you. Your pain is pointless. From childhood, we're taught that pain is bad, an error to correct. But Viktor Frankl observed that most people believe suffering has no purpose, because they've never been shown how to assign it one. And so we run. From grief, from shame, from the terrifying possibility that life might hurt forever. But here's where it gets dangerous. Because if you believe pain has no meaning, you stop looking for it. And if you stop looking for meaning in your suffering, you never find the thing that could actually heal you. Instead, you spiral, you sedate, you become a performance of a person instead of a presence. Like Jonas, who laughed when he didn't feel joy, and worked when he felt dead inside, who said, "I'm fine," so often, he began to believe that pretending was strength. And maybe you've done the same, faked your way through pain because that's what the world applauds. But Viktor Frankl's psychology reveals something few dare say out loud. When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. If that stings, it should, because maybe the thing you're calling coping is really just hiding. Jonas printed that Frankl quote and taped it to his bathroom mirror. He didn't understand it yet, but he sensed it was the first honest sentence he'd read in months. He started journaling. He wrote letters to his brother he never sent. He sat with the pain, not to escape it, but to meet it. And something in him whispered, maybe this isn't the end of the story. Maybe this pain is the beginning of something else. But here's where it gets dangerous, because the moment you open the door to meaning, you also awaken something else, a deeper fear, a darker truth, something Jonas was not ready for. What Jonas discovered next will shock you. It's the second lie about suffering, and it's the reason so many people feel broken even after healing begins. Jonas kept going. He woke up, he ate, he even went out with friends again. From the outside, things looked normal, but inside, the silence was getting louder. Grief didn't dissolve with the months. It mutated into numbness, into apathy, into something worse than sadness, emptiness. People told him, time heals all wounds. He tried to believe them. But as the months passed, he wasn't healing. He was drifting. And that's when he found one of Viktor Frankl's most controversial insights. It did not really matter what we expected from life, but rather what life expected from us. Frankl flipped the question. Instead of asking, "When will I feel better?" he asked, "What does my suffering demand of me?" That was the moment Jonas realized something gutting. Time doesn't heal you. Meaning does. The second lie we're fed is this: just give it time. But that's like telling a starving man, just wait, or a bleeding wound. Ignore it long enough, and it'll disappear. Frankl's existentialism never promised comfort. It demanded response. In the concentration camps, he saw people suffer the same external horrors. But the ones who survived? They weren't the strongest. They were the ones who gave their pain purpose. Some imagined seeing their family again. Others dreamed of rewriting a lost manuscript. Many had nothing, except the belief that their suffering meant something. What is to give light must endure burning. Frankl Jonas wasn't healing because he was waiting for the storm to pass, instead of learning to dance inside it. And here's where it gets dangerous. Because if you believe time heals all wounds, you abdicate responsibility for your own transformation. You assume pain will dissolve on its own. But pain doesn't dissolve. It buries itself. And buried pain becomes bitterness, becomes addiction, becomes that quiet rage you aim at people you love, or at yourself. Jonas noticed something. He wasn't crying anymore, but he also wasn't laughing. He had numbed everything, thinking he was surviving. But what he'd really done was disconnect. And this is what logotherapy teaches us. Suffering is unavoidable, but your attitude toward it is everything. Frankl's entire method was built on this premise. We are not free from suffering, but we are free to choose how we relate to it. And waiting is not a choice. It's a delay, a dangerous one. Jonas began to understand. He had to stop waiting for time to save him. He had to find a reason worth suffering for. So he started small. Volunteered at a grief group. listened to stories of others with similar wounds. He didn't speak much at first, but something about their pain echoed his own. He wasn't alone. He never had been. He just believed he was, because the world told him healing is passive. It's not. It's active. It's messy. It's sacred. But here's where it gets dangerous. Because once you stop waiting, once you start looking for meaning, you start to see the patterns you've been stuck in. And some of them, you chose without realizing. You thought they were survival, but they were prisons. Jonas wasn't just grieving. He was clinging to the identity of someone broken. And when that identity begins to unravel, you face the third lie, the one that poisons even your smallest attempts to heal. What Jonas realized next cuts deeper than grief. It's the third lie, the hidden force that makes suffering contagious. Jonas sat alone in a dim cafe, steam rising from a cup he barely touched. Across the room, people smiled, laughed, shared photos, spilled coffee, and joy like it was free. He watched, hollowed out, like a ghost observing the living. He thought, what's wrong with me? How could everyone else move forward while he stayed frozen? And this, he would later realize, was the third and most toxic lie about suffering. You're the only one who feels this way. It didn't shout at him. It whispered. You're weak. You're broken. No one else would understand. And it isolated him, quietly, completely. In Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl explained the brutal logic of emotional isolation. An abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal behavior. In other words, feeling crushed under grief, anxiety, or meaninglessness does not make you crazy. It makes you human. But when you believe you're alone in your pain, you build walls. You perform strength. You avoid the very people who might help you see yourself again. Frankl wrote of a man in Auschwitz who gave up hope. He dreamed he'd be free by a certain date. That date came and passed. He fell sick and died days later. Frankl didn't blame the illness. He blamed the loss of hope. And hope dies quickest in isolation. Logotherapy insists we find meaning through others, in love, in service, in shared suffering. Love is the ultimate and the highest goal to which man can aspire, Frankl wrote. And even in despair, we must turn outward. Jonas didn't want to go to the grief group. He thought it was for the weak. But what he found were men and women carrying wounds just like his. Not with solutions, but with presence. One woman told a story about losing her child. Jonas didn't speak. He just cried. And in that moment, something shattered. Not his pain, but his silence. He wasn't the only one. The shame that had wrapped itself around his grief began to dissolve, because someone else had named what he thought was unspeakable. Here's where it gets dangerous. When you believe you're the only one suffering, you mistake pain for personal failure. You turn your wound into your identity. And that identity, it becomes a lens. You start to see yourself as the broken one. You sabotage intimacy. You push people away before they get too close to your scar tissue. You become addicted to solitude, not because you love it, but because you fear being seen. And yet, being seen is exactly what begins the healing. Jonas kept showing up. He stopped faking his smile. He let his voice shake when he talked. And slowly, the mask melted. What Frankl's logotherapy taught him was this: the salvation of man is through love and in love. We are healed by connection, not the shallow kind, the real kind, the kind born from shared struggle, from the courage to say, "Me too." But here's where it gets dangerous. Once you realize you're not alone in your suffering, you also see how much of your life has been shaped by the effort to hide it. You begin to notice your patterns, your escape routes, the stories you've told yourself to avoid the pain. And those stories? They have rules, invisible ones. What Jonas discovered next was a system, a hidden psychological mechanism that governs how we suffer, and why most of us stay stuck in it. Jonas stood in front of the mirror, staring at his own reflection like it was a stranger. The eyes looking back weren't tired. They were haunted by a question he couldn't stop asking. Why can't I just be normal again? Everyone around him seemed to bounce back, get over it, move on. But not him. He kept asking, "What's wrong with me?" As if suffering were a symptom of failure, as if pain was proof of being broken. And that's the fourth lie. If you're still suffering, something is wrong with you. We don't say it out loud, but society implies it every day. Struggle is treated like weakness, sadness like a flaw, pain like a personal defect. Even therapists, friends, and motivational quotes tell us to fix ourselves, as if discomfort is a virus and happiness is the cure. But Viktor Frankl warned that this mindset is not just wrong, it's dangerous. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Frankl's existentialism flips the entire question. It's not, "What's wrong with me?" It's, "What is this suffering demanding from me?" Pain isn't a malfunction. It's a messenger, a signal that something matters, that you are still engaged with life, even if it's tearing you apart. Jonas began to notice something else. Whenever he opened up about his pain, people got uncomfortable. They'd change the subject, crack a joke, offer a solution instead of a space. It made him feel worse, like his pain was inconvenient. And that's when the trap tightens. You internalize the discomfort of others. You start believing your emotions are too much, that your grief is too heavy, that you are too broken to be loved. But Frankl's philosophy shows the opposite. Suffering is an ineradicable part of life, even as fate and death. To suffer is not to fail. To suffer is to be awake to the depth of your humanity. Here's where it gets dangerous. When you assume suffering means you're defective, you try to hide it. You perform okay. You chase temporary highs. You numb yourself with productivity, relationships, even spirituality. But no escape heals what hasn't been honestly faced. Jonas realized he wasn't healing because he was still playing the game, trying to appear put together, trying to make pain look acceptable. And that game, it's rigged. Because the more you try to fix yourself, the more you reinforce the idea that something inside you is wrong. Frankl's genius wasn't just in surviving Auschwitz. It was in refusing to let that suffering define him as broken. He saw meaning in the madness, purpose in the pain, a deeper self, revealed through suffering, not in spite of it. Jonas stopped asking, "What's wrong with me?" He started asking, "What is life asking of me, right now, in this pain?" And slowly, the shame began to lift. He wasn't broken. He was becoming. But here's where it gets dangerous. Because once you see that suffering isn't a defect, you realize how much of your life has been spent avoiding the very thing that could transform you. Avoiding the pain, avoiding the truth, avoiding the deep confrontation with self that suffering demands. And what happens when you finally stop running? What Jonas did next was radical, not because it was loud, but because it was honest. He stepped into the most difficult truth Frankl ever taught, that the path out of suffering is not comfort, it's courage. Jonas was done pretending, done numbing, done performing the script of a man who had it all together. He sat on the cold floor of his apartment, lights off, back against the wall, and whispered out loud, "I don't know who I am without this pain." It wasn't a breakdown. It was a beginning. Because this time, he wasn't asking how to get rid of the suffering. He was asking what it was pointing to. And that question changed everything. According to logotherapy, the central principle isn't to eliminate suffering, but to transform it through meaning. In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. Viktor Frankl's solution wasn't easy. It was radical. He didn't promise happiness. He promised freedom through responsibility. He wrote that humans are not driven by the pursuit of pleasure or the avoidance of pain, but by the search for meaning. Jonas finally understood. The pain wasn't something to escape. It was something to engage. He stopped asking, "Why me?" and started asking, "What now?" He began writing again. Not polished essays, but raw, cracked pages of grief and rage and hope. He wrote letters to the version of himself that thought feeling nothing was safer. He began to feel everything. And here's where Frankl's method became real. Jonas started showing up not as a broken man trying to heal, but as a human trying to offer meaning to someone else's suffering. He volunteered full-time with a crisis support group. He didn't give advice. He listened, deeply, quietly, without fixing. And the people he sat with, they didn't need answers. They needed to feel seen in the dark. That's the power of meaning. It turns your deepest wound into someone else's safety net. Suffering in and of itself is meaningless. We give our suffering meaning by the way in which we respond to it. Frankl Jonas didn't get over his brother's death. He never will. But he no longer asks life to erase it. Instead, he asks life to use it. That is the radical path out. Not comfort, not denial, but courageous confrontation. And here's where it gets dangerous. Because meaning is not convenient. It demands you show up. It doesn't always feel good. It doesn't always fix things. But it transforms you into someone who can carry the pain and still keep walking. Jonas started seeing the world differently, not as a place to survive, but as a place to serve, to offer presence, not perfection. Frankl believed that the moment you say yes to the suffering, not as punishment, but as potential, you unlock something sacred, a form of quiet power, because you're no longer afraid of what hurts. You're aware of what it can become. Jonas still has bad days. He still gets triggered. But now, when the pain comes, he doesn't run. He leans in. He listens. Because inside every ache is a question. What does this moment ask of me? And that's the essence of logotherapy. Meaning is not found in what happens to you. It's found in how you respond. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Viktor Frankl. But here's where it gets dangerous. Because once you begin to live this way, you'll never again see suffering as something meaningless. You'll see it as a call. And what Jonas chose next was not survival. It was legacy. Jonas stood in front of a group of 15 strangers. Some were recovering addicts. Others were grieving parents. One was fresh out of a psychiatric hold. All of them were in pain. And for the first time in his life, Jonas didn't feel like an imposter. He took a breath, looked them in the eye, and said, "I'm not here because I have the answers. I'm here because I've suffered too. No mask, no performance, just presence." And in that moment, everything Viktor Frankl ever taught clicked. Ultimately, man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather must recognize that it is he who is asked. We are not passive victims of fate. We are participants in the creation of meaning, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. This wasn't theory anymore. It was real. Jonas had become the kind of man he never imagined he could be. A man who could hold space for others without collapsing. A man who no longer ran from pain, but stood inside it with purpose. That is the final lesson of Viktor Frankl. We are free, not from suffering, but within it. The freedom to choose your attitude, to turn pain into presence, to offer love in a world that may never repay it. That is what makes you powerful. Here's where most people get stuck. They wait for the world to get easier before they decide to live differently. But Frankl taught the opposite. Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose. Jonas didn't wait for the grief to pass. He built meaning in it, through it, because of it. And the meaning wasn't grand. It wasn't fame or some heroic purpose. It was in the way he listened, the way he sat silently next to a man who had just lost his son, the way he chose not to look away from someone else's suffering, because he finally stopped looking away from his own. That's the power of meaning. It doesn't always fix your life, but it anchors you when everything else falls apart. Frankl believed that those who survived the camps were not necessarily the strongest, but the ones who had something to live for, someone to love, or a task still unfinished. Jonas had all three now. Not because life handed it to him, but because he chose to make it true. And here's where it gets dangerous. Because once you know this, once you feel this kind of meaning in your bones, there's no going back to numbness, no more excuses, no more pretending that life has to be perfect for it to be sacred. You're not waiting anymore. You're responding. And that response, that choice, is what makes meaning real. Jonas still carries his grief, but now he carries it like a lantern, a soft light in the darkness, not just for himself, but for anyone else still trying to find their way. He didn't escape suffering. He redeemed it. And that's the invitation Frankl left for all of us, that even in the face of unavoidable suffering, you can still choose to create, to love, to serve, to live. Because you are not the pain you endured. You are what you do with it. Jonas Keller was never rescued. No miracle, no magic switch, no epiphany that erased the pain. But today, he walks with it. Not as a burden, but as a companion. Not as a curse, but as a calling. He didn't just survive. He transformed. Because he stopped believing the lies. That pain has no meaning. That time alone will heal you. That you're suffering alone. That something must be wrong with you. He rejected all of them. And what he discovered was this. Suffering isn't the end. It's the beginning of a deeper life, if you dare to face it honestly. And now, you have the same dangerous knowledge. You know that Viktor Frankl's philosophy isn't about avoiding pain. It's about answering it, living through it, becoming because of it. So here's your question. What is life asking of you right now, through the very thing that hurts the most? Not someday, not after you're healed, now. If this message lit a fire inside you, don't let it go dark. Subscribe, so you never forget what you just learned. This is more than a channel. It's a place for those who walk through the fire and come out changed. Jonas did it. So can you. And you don't have to do it alone anymore. We're here, right beside you in the dark, and we're not afraid of your pain.